What if the tumor trying to kill you could actually heal you? And what if the seemingly boring policy details around psychedelic access matter as much as the healing experiences themselves? In this episode, we speak with Ashley Lukens, a proud cancer thriver and co-founder of the Clarity Project, which is Hawaii's leading psychedelic access organization. Ashley holds a PhD in political science and has spent over 2 decades advancing issues around environmental justice and psychedelic medicine access. After receiving a vision during an ayahuasca ceremony just 10 days before her brain cancer diagnosis, Ashley has blended psychedelic medicines, integrative treatment approaches, and conventional cancer treatment into her healing journey. Ashley shares her radical reframing of cancer through the mantra, "I heal my tumor and my tumor heals me." As a person living with cancer, I've always focused on the first part of that mantra, healing my tumor. But Ashley goes much further with the inspiring perspective that the tumor itself is healing. Think about that for a second. Ashley believes that the tumor heals her, and she shares the hard work that she's done to reach this point in her cancer journey. In our conversation, Ashley and I explore how psychedelic medicines helped her work with the 9 key factors from the book Radical Remission, particularly around trusting intuition, finding purpose, and becoming a vocal advocate in her own cancer care. We also dig into the critical nuts and bolts of legal psychedelic access, cost structures and insurance coverage and banking regulations and implementation frameworks that determine whether people living with cancer can actually access these medicines. And I know sometimes these policy details can sound a little boring, but Ashley helps us understand why they're critical in providing safe legal access so that we get to choose whether or not to use psychedelic medicines in our journeys. This podcast is brought to you by Healing Cancer Journeys. We're a nonprofit organization providing education and community for people exploring psychedelic medicines in their cancer journeys. You can find us online at www.healingcancerjourneys.org or follow us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Substack, where our handle is Healing Cancer Journeys. And as always, this podcast is not intended as legal or medical advice. It's only provided for educational purposes. I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Ashley Lukens. Ashley Lukens, welcome.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. I want to start with your cancer journey. And on your website, one of the things that you say is that you're a proud cancer thriver. And tell us a little bit about your cancer journey and how you really grew into that identity as being a proud thriver.
So it actually delves in perfectly with our topic today. When I was 36 years old, I was on a 10-day long women's health retreat in Peru. And prior to this retreat, I had been having these like weird visual auras in my vision. They would kind of like flood my vision. Everything would sort of like dissolve and then kind of come back. I Googled it, as you know, all modern human beings do. And it told me I either had a brain tumor or ocular migraine. So being the optimist that I am, I chose ocular migraine. I didn't want to follow up with a doctor because I had this retreat on the horizon. So I went to Peru. I went on this women's retreat. And on that retreat, I had the opportunity to do my first ever ayahuasca journey. And in that journey, I had this vision that I was going to get really sick and die. And I had this image of myself on my couch, letting go. I had my dogs there. And I sort of processed that whole thing. I mean, in my ayahuasca journey, I was having this experience. Externally, the world was experiencing me wailing. And 5 days later, I came home and I found out I had a brain tumor. And actually, I was still sort of in the tail of my psychedelic journey when I got the news. And so I sort of approached it existentially. I mean, when you do psychedelics, you are in your impermanence. And so in some way I got this diagnosis of low grade brain cancer as like something that was happening to my body, but not to me. I mean, I am
Hmm.
forever. Um I actually don't think I knew I had cancer. I knew I had a brain tumor, but they told me it's probably benign. Some asshole brain surgeon that I interviewed told me I had cancer in like a dismissive way, like, "Oh no, there's no benign brain tumors. You have cancer." That's how I found out. Um I kind of immediately I had heard about a woman in my social circle that had been diagnosed with I want to say like a late stage breast cancer, and her journey had been really inspiring to me. So somebody sent me this like how to have cancer workbook.
Hmm.
Krista Whittemer was her name, just to credit her. So I got this like Google Doc sent to me, and it recommended to read the book Radical Remission. So that book became my like cancer playbook. So I like found out I was on ayahuasca, found out I was going to die, died, was reborn, found out I had this cancer diagnosis, read this book that said miracles are possible. And I was like, okay, 9 key factors. I got this. I am going to take every single one of these key factors so seriously. I'll send for your show notes. I actually wrote a white paper that looks at
Nice.
all of the scientific literature that shows the connection between what psychedelics enables and what the 9 key factors in radical remission are. But anyway, that's how I always approached it. I don't relate to the term fuck cancer. Like for me, cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me. I would never give it up. My mantra was I heal my tumor and my tumor heals me. And my cancer was like this invitation to radically change my life and lean like full throttle into my own healing and awakening. And like it is a precious thing in my life that I cherish. It also, I can descend into profound terror around it every now and then. I mean, I have kids, and so that's mostly what's terrifying is leaving them. But I really feel like psychedelics enabled me to like approach that. And so I had a brain surgery, I did chemo, I did radiation. But every process I just approached like as if it was magic. Like I remember when I did chemo, I like researched the doctor that invented the chemo. And I made this little altar with him, and I would like tune in to all of the positive energy that these research put into this medication. And like that was what I ingested. I didn't ingest the pharmaceutical. I ingested all that hard work, all that tenacity, all of that good intention. And like just really, yeah, I just chose to turn every step in that journey into magic. And
You,
like,
your perspective that the tumor heals me is
mm,
phenomenal. I think you said, I heal my tumor and my tumor heals me. Now, most of us, myself included, very focused on healing the tumor, but you're also in the space of the tumor healing me.
mm,
And you talked about the 9 steps in that book and how psychedelic medicines aligned back to each of those steps. I don't think we have time to go through all 9 of those steps, but if there's 1 or 2 steps that psychedelic medicines really helped you with to get to that perspective of the tumor healing you,
Mm.
How did psychedelic medicines help you get there?
Yeah, well, I just want to say, like, in the nine key factors, only two of them are what you would think, like change your diet and yeah, like take supplements. So the rest are psycho spiritual. They're really about like finding your reason for being alive. And like psychedelics truly taps you into your soul self. Like, and it is that soul self that is expressed in how we build a life. And it is that soul self that is repressed when we are not living in our dharma and our purpose. So that's always been one that I think is easy for people to get. Like, oh, I want to be like living what I'm meant to live, and like, what is my purpose? And I think psychedelics is just it's so profoundly revealing, and you actually can like physically feel when you're out of alignment with your soul's purpose, like, I'm not, this is not. And then being an advocate and not a patient is for real. And I'm a bit of a boss, like just my personality archetype.
You have to be a boss to get through cancer care. You do. You
100%.
have to advocate for yourself.
And you have to be able to honor everybody's limitations in your on your team. And like I always said, I'm the fucking CEO of AshleyLukensCancer.com. Like, this is me.
Amen.
So I'll take you under advisement. I'll take you under advisement. And that capacity to do that is related to another key factor, which is following your intuition. But for me, it's about trusting yourself. I could only come in and tell my brain surgeon, this is what I'm going to do. And like, this is what I want. And like to believe in I wanted to end chemo early. And so I felt like I'm done. I did it. I had my experience. They wanted me to be on it for a year, but I was like, I'm done. And so I brought my case to the tumor board and I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'd like your feedback, but I don't think I'm going to go standard of care. And he came back, he's like, yeah, I really respect your decision. I think it's the right one for you. So it's like, if I had felt nervous that like I don't have the right educational training to substantiate what like I felt fully in my body, I would have not advocated for myself. And who knows the long-term impacts of me having been on chemo for a whole year. I think as a woman, I was told the day before I started chemo, they were like, did you freeze your eggs? And I was like, no, was I supposed to? And they're like, well, yeah, I mean, do you want to not start chemo? And I was like, what
Shouldn't
the
you have told me this
actual fuck is happening to me right
before
now?
the
I'm like,
day? Yeah.
no, I don't want to stop
Mm,
chemo. Thanks
yeah,
for the
yeah, yeah.
option. And I had a baby just 2 years ago. So it's like, all of that I think is fortified through a psychedelic experience. And what I think psychedelics is just an awakening into yourself and your own self-knowing, and like this real, yeah. And psychedelic, I didn't do psychedelics in a vacuum. Like, I have a therapist, I have a coach, like I have years of introspection so that a psychedelic experience could yield what it yielded for me. I don't want people to think like, oh, I'm going to take some mushrooms and tomorrow I'm going to turn into, it's a practice, but it's certainly a major tool in the toolkit. And yeah, it
And
just
your
allowed me to see how blessed a health crisis can make us, you
my
know?
tumor heals me. That says everything in terms of where you are today. And I really like what you said about owning your own care, being advocate for yourself, taking input from other people, but at the end of the day, you get to decide whether or not you're going to continue chemo. And that's a really nice way to think about psychedelic medicines is we should be able to choose whether or not we want to use psychedelic medicines in our journeys. And yet there's a governmental entity that says that we don't have that choice. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the work that you've done with the Clarity Project to help us have that choice, to help us potentially have access to psychedelic medicines in our journey. Tell us a little bit about the Clarity Project and your mission.
So, for my professional life, I am a philanthropic advisor. So, folks come to me and I help direct their charitable giving. And I had a client say, I want to advance access to psychedelics. And having had my own personal psychedelic practice, that felt important. It also makes me sad when I see folks facing a cancer diagnosis in a way that feels really disempowered. And, I mean, I don't know much about you, Dan, but I've been living with this diagnosis for about a decade. And I've had a lot of people come to me when they're diagnosed and when their mom or brother, or sister, best friend, and everybody kind of sees my journey and thinks, well, that's what I want for my family member. And when I explain that a part of my awakening into this other story, bless cancer, yes, cancer, thriving, has been facilitated by my own ego work, which is facilitated by psychedelics. I would never do that. It's illegal. My mom would never do a drug. Um, and so the legality of these substances matter for a lot of people. And um,
The legality and the
they're
stigma
not going to
around it.
take
So I was saying the legality and the stigma of I'm not going to do a
yeah.
drug because I've been told that drugs are bad, and so it's interesting that there are legal considerations and the stigma around it. But you are talking about some of the legal considerations.
Yeah, I think it's just a barrier that's insurmountable for folks. And policy change, I always tell people, is an equity strategy. It's about access for all, not access for some. I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge for anybody listening to this podcast that you can legally do ayahuasca in the United States. That is a religious practice that has been federally protected and it's been litigated all the way up to the Supreme Court. You can legally access psychedelics now in Colorado and in Oregon. And in many cities, they've decriminalized certain psychedelics, especially psilocybin. So if you feel like I need to get access now, those are options. And then there are obviously places around the world where these medicines have been held in sacred trust and they are legal. Um, but back to Hawaii, not legal, not accessible. Folks aren't going to go to an ayahuasca ceremony. I think that kind of like gray black market has also led to like considerations about the efficacy of psychedelics. When you look at the scientific literature on psychedelics, it's really about set and setting. It's about knowing you're getting the right dose and that you're being held in the right container. And a part of that container is a trained facilitator. And while we now have the proliferation of many certifying bodies that give somebody a credential around psychedelic integration coaching, if it's in a place where those psychedelics are legal, those folks are taking on real professional liability if they're guiding somebody through a session. So that's been the context within which my advocacy of psychedelics is about expanding access, safe, legal access, and creating a context within which these trained professionals don't have to risk liability exposure in providing access to these medicines. So
And the Clarity Project is focused specifically on Hawaii, providing safe legal access in Hawaii. What do you see as success? If you were to say, if these two or three things happened, we would have accomplished our mission. We don't have to exist anymore. What does success look like in Hawaii?
So you can't make success like winning in the policy realm. It's just more complicated than that. I have to take the intermediary wins. I call myself the pencil skirt and pearls of psychedelics. Like, I want to normalize it. I want to professionalize it. I want people to see that, like, this is not, and by the way, no judgment. This is not just a Burning Man thing. This is also like something that is profound and earth shattering, and everybody deserves to be able to do it safely without um, negative feedback. So that's success to me. I mean, success to me is I just met with a woman who came to one of my like radical remission healing circles, really young breast cancer thriver. And like she went on a healing retreat in California that where they did psychedelics with all breast cancer survivors. Like that, just offering her that moment where we can destigmatize and normalize, and then that experience, she said it's like forever will change my life. Like that's what I want for folks. And again, cancer will change your life, whether you like it or not. Might as well leverage it to be a positive life change. And I just feel like that's one of the ways that psychedelics can help you, is help you see, yeah, maybe through the challenges that a diagnosis like that can create.
And it's so interesting how you answer the question of what success looks like, because it's not a specific policy outcome, it's not a specific legislative win. It's normalizing psychedelics, it's becoming the pencil skirt and pearl representative of psychedelic medicines, and again reducing that stigma, providing normalization. I'd also like to hear about some of the challenges that you've faced in accomplishing that goal of normalization.
You know, the tides have really turned on psychedelics. So I always say major win for me was last year when we met with the head of the Department of Health, and he said, "No, no, no, you don't need to convince me. I think it's a great idea. Let's do it. Let's figure it out." So I think it's less convincing people these days. It's more working out the nuts and bolts of access. Um, I think the challenge that we are all facing collectively is that our economy and our political system are fracturing and breaking, and that leads to mental illness. And psychedelics do not mix well with mental illness. And I think that's been the biggest challenge for me, is like these are not medicines for everybody, and this is not a medicine for everything. And I think the healing of, I think healing can be so fucking profound. You know, I have this thing, this diagnosis, this label of cancer that I get to live in juxtaposition to, right? So like my healing has this thing, well, she's not dead yet or something. But like, and I think people want that. And I want to say, like, it's not, psychedelics didn't get me here. It just showed me the work I needed to do so that I could heal. And like I feel really committed. Another one of my like taglines is heal out loud. Like people want to learn about other people's healing journeys, because we are all desperate for healing. Psychedelics is not a silver bullet. It's not like you're going to do one dose and things are going to be clear. I mean, I worked with a Jungian analyst 3 times a week for 10 years to
Oh,
kind of
wow.
work through my trauma.
Yeah.
And I think that's another one of the radical remission key factors is healing your trauma.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you go back to that ayahuasca journey for me when I discovered that I had something going on. And I always tell people, like, my body knew I had a brain tumor. I mean, obviously it was responding. I just didn't know. So of course in a psychedelic experience my body would be sending these images to me, right? And in a lot of people use meditation and mindfulness to have that full integrative self-knowing. For me, psychedelics facilitated that, but I don't. So I think that's the biggest challenge for me, Dan, is like, I think it is very hard to be alive right now. It is very hard to be alive in America. And we are seeing extreme mental illness. And we are also seeing cancer as a result of that mental illness. That is an infinity loop that goes on and on forever. And you can't just like haphazardly throw psychedelics into that mix. And so,
Nuts and bolts matter. You talked earlier about the fact that the tide has changed, so it's less about convincing changing minds of legislatures. Is more about the nuts and bolts, particularly around access, because those nuts and bolts matter. Tell us about some of the specific nuts and bolts that have mattered the most in Hawaii, and how other change movements can learn from what you've learned down in Hawaii.
sure. So I want to talk about the Oregon model. So Oregon passed psychedelic assisted therapies through a ballot initiative. We don't have ballot initiatives in Hawaii, so we're going to have to move it through the legislature like they did in New Mexico. And when you ask people, "Oh, you got it in Oregon now," the first thing they'll say to you is it's like $2,000 a pop, and who can afford that? And so that's been this challenge that we've been facing as we've tried to create safe legal access, is like, well, what's the cost of that going to be? And it turns out like actually having a state regulated psychedelic program is millions and millions and millions of dollars. And it is a very difficult climate within which businesses can operate. Even with marijuana, for example, if you guys don't know this, like, because it's still a Schedule One substance, cannabis companies can't use the normal banking system. So there's just these like behind the scenes dynamics that make progress towards a fully functioning ecosystem within which safe legal access is possible really difficult. And as somebody that can't just come up with the perfect program and have the public vote on it, rather I have to work it through a legislative process where different types of people are weighing in as subject matter experts, I find it really overwhelming. Like, I don't know what the right program is going to look like where access to psychedelics is affordable, in part because of the therapy piece, right? Like, mushrooms, I don't know how much a bag of mushrooms goes for, but let's say $50. It's the therapy
Right.
that's the expensive part.
Right.
And you're
Right.
talking about dosing someone in a 6 hour setting. So that six times, let's say a therapist is pretty inexpensive, 125 an hour. You have no insurance reimbursements. And you have to pay for the physical location of the dosing. And sometimes people need like 3 sessions so it's like, it's not surprising. It's not Oregon's fault that it's expensive. It's an expensive model because of the people that are required to make it successful. And I don't have a solve for that.
Yeah.
I don't
And
really know what to do.
sometimes those goals of safety and broad access work against one another, because safety is expensive. You want to have a therapist there for
Totally.
safety reasons and for integration reasons, but those therapists cost money, and that cost narrows access. So finding those trade-offs between cost and safety is that's challenging to navigate. Um, I'd also love your perspective on the cancer community and organizing the cancer community as advocates in the psychedelic medicine movements. I think you've been through this as a cancer thriver. I've been through this as a cancer thriver. We carry tremendous wisdom in our bodies, and there's so much wisdom to bear and bring into that psychedelics movement. What are your thoughts on the best way to organize and activate the cancer community?
I don't know, Dan. I mean, the hardest thing for me about living with a diagnosis like mine, is watching people buy the Western medical story about cancer whole hog and erasing themselves in that process. And it's devastating for me to watch, just like, oh, my doctor says I can't do that. Like, oh, I would never do. So I'm like, there's so many more like groundwork that needs to happen in the cancer community to like empower people to question the Western medical model and like the way that it defines and describes cancer. And secondarily to that, to recognize how pharmaceutical companies and medical corporations and insurance companies have massively narrowed the treatment modalities that people have affordable access to. And so, like, psychedelics can lead to that awakening, you know? It can, but like, yeah, I'm like, you have to be able to question the medical model first before you can even begin to see the role that psychedelics can play in your own healing journey. And like, that's why I feel like in the broader, social change is nonlinear, of course. Everybody's on a different part of that windy, swirly journey. And, you know, it's hard to ask a cross section of society that's suffering so much to like do more. Ironically, oftentimes doing more is healing, and living for others over yourself is like one of the 9 key factors. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess my thought is like, if we're gonna mobilize the community, I feel like collectively we're at the point where like podcasts like yours are what we need to invest our time in, is like really trying to norm and uplift these alternative stories that articulate how we can find power within the system and power outside of the system to chart our own healing course. And from that place, I truly believe that more folks living with cancer will understand the tool that psychedelics can be. But, you know, I think some people think about like microdosing, for example. They think of psychedelics like a pill that you can take every day. And that's not where the scientific literature takes us. The scientific literature doesn't look at microdosing, it looks at macrodosing. And it's not something you do every day. It's something you do once and then you work it. You work the dividends, you find the nuggets, you reflect back, you pull. That integration is more important than the 6 hours you're on the substance. And so
Integration can last years. You talked about
100%.
10 years of psychoanalysis to work on some of the things from those journeys, and so that can take a long time. And your earlier point about empowering the cancer community, empowering folks living with cancer to look at the Western medical model. That when you said that, what I think is that the medical model breaks us up into constituent parts and looks at me, Dan, a human being with a family and friends and loves and hopes and hates, as a hunk of meat with a tumor that needs to be carved out. And that the medical model looks at the tumor and misses the human. And if we don't start to question that model and demand that our doctors and the cancer care system looks at us as humans, one, we're going to receive lower quality care. And two, we're never going to understand the value of psychedelic medicines, because psychedelic medicines are about seeing us in our totality, whole physical selves, whole spiritual selves. And but you're right, it starts with empowerment, and it starts with conversations like this, storytelling like this, to start to empower folks. But you're
Well,
making
I
a
mean,
great
not
point. It's a slow journey.
Radical Remission, it began as this social worker that noticed all of these cases of radical remission in her social work practice. And cancer, as you know, is studied idiopathically. So, like, doctors are really only looking at lung cancers, and now the derivatives, each lung cancer has a different genetic subtype. And she looked across all cancers and said, what did these cases of radical remission have in common? And after hundreds and hundreds of interviews, that's how she derived these nine key factors. My thought is, like, cancer is just one of many different diseases that our physical bodies are facing. And for someone like me, I mean, I caught my brain cancer early. So I have a grade 2 oligodendroglioma. And even since I've been diagnosed, the understanding in the literature on my cancer has changed completely. Now it's reclassified. So if I was only looking at things that heal my one tumor, I would only have like 3 tools in the toolbox. But if I look at cancer as a chronic illness and it's something that's out of whack inside of my body, I have so many more tools at my disposal to heal myself. And in that way, you get to draw on the literature of people who are advancing radical healing from many different chronic illnesses. And you get to, like, really start to explore how to integrate those healing modalities in your own life. So it's like it becomes less about cancer, which is like scary and it's got a big C and to, like, yeah, my body is saying something. Like Gabor Mate, when the body says no, like my body said no, 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 no.
Yeah, yeah.
What was it saying no to? And, like, what do I get to say yes to now that I'm going to listen to this massive wake up call? I think that psychedelics has allowed me to see this. So there's that. It's not the only way. It's not a fast way. It's really hard work. It's really, 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 really hard work. But for me, I'd rather be doing this work than what Western medicine sells me as the one FDA approved drug for my cancer. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And what you said is really a revelation to me personally in terms of how I think about my cancer. And I think about how I think a lot of people think about their cancers, which is that I have lung cancer, or I have kidney cancer, or whatever that tumor type is. I'll share a story. I have testicular cancer. Most folks with testicular cancer is very curable. Mine was not. I've been through all of the treatment options. My doctor came to me and said, okay, Dan, you're out of options. You've relapsed God knows how many times. That combination of you're likely to relapse again, you don't have any more treatment options, that points to a terminal prognosis. And, I received that prognosis, changed my life. But reframing what you just said away from just testicular cancer and just my tumor type and only the treatments for that tumor type to cancer more broadly, more holistically, that's really a revelation. So thank you for sharing that perspective. And I think it just gets back to holistic understanding, holistic perspectives that psychedelic medicines can really help us get there. And your point earlier that it is not a silver bullet, it's not going to, we're not going to wake up tomorrow and have that perspective, but it's a starting point to help us get to that more holistic perspective. So
You know,
it's a
I
great
I
point.
met someone who had like a advanced colon cancer, and she's taken the like strictly Western route. Her husband's a medical doctor, so I can kind of understand like all these things that I'm doing she thinks are insane. Whereas, Dan, I have to tell you, like, I'm the type of person, if somebody's like, jump on your left foot, hold a crystal, and sing Om Shanti, it cures cancer, I'd be like, okay, let's try it. Like, let's just give it all a go. I asked her recently, what's your why? And she said, what do you mean? I said, why do you think you got cancer? She's like, well, I never thought about that. And I'm like, that's just, I think another invitation that psychedelics offers us is like always querying after the deeper contexts in which our living bodies are operating. And so that helps us understand, wow, do I live with like toxins in my home and in my food? Am I so stressed out at work that like my body is experiencing all of these physiological impacts? But I also think, why is it that my doctor only recommends pharmaceutical drugs when the literature tells us that high dose vitamin C IVs are helpful for all types of cancer? That So that's been the other thing, just like that that willingness to like keep asking after feels really important in this moment in time when cancer is a big fucking business. And yeah, I mean it's benefiting the few and hurting the many, and I'm really grateful for it. Like did it all.
I did it too. This is the hardest thing is I am grateful for insurance companies. I am so grateful for insurance companies. I hate them, but I am so grateful for them because my cancer care was ridiculously expensive. I am so grateful for pharmaceutical companies. They literally save my life. They drive me crazy, but they save my life. I get really frustrated with my doctors, but they save my life. And so that Western medical model that we're somewhat critical of in this conversation also saved our lives, and I'm so grateful. And so it's finding that balance to say, yes, the Western medical model has gotten us pretty far, but also there's some gaps, and being open to your point on the whys. Why are there gaps? And recognizing that psychedelic medicines might help us fill some of those gaps. They're not a panacea. They're not going to replace modern medicine, but they might help us identify some of the whys. I also think that the power of whys helps us understand not just why did this happen to me physiologically, but why did this happen to me in the story of my life? How do I incorporate this into my personal narrative of who I am? And psychedelic medicines can really help us get there. And they helped you get to my tumor heals me. And that is just so powerful in terms of that. Wow.
You know, my dad died of cancer when I was 23, and it was not my story. That's what I made sure of. He got diagnosed late stage prostate cancer, metastasized, made it about 3 years on traditional chemos, or traditional on oncological care, and then he went into the clinical trial game, which I'm really critical of, just watching him be a lab rat. So when I got diagnosed, obviously my whole family is like profoundly traumatized by what happened to my dad. And my dad didn't want to tell anybody he was sick. We weren't allowed to tell anybody. Now my mantra is heal out, live as somebody who talks very frequently about my diagnosis. And I want to be clear to everybody listening, like, I am in active care and will be until I die. I go and get brain scans every 3 months. I am sitting in an IV chair getting high dose vitamin C IVs once a week. Like, I am, there is no remission in my cancer. And so I will live with this diagnosis, and I have to learn to live with it. And yet, at the same time, I think that cancer has emerged as a indicator of what we have done in society. And like, I really do believe that we have to like fully find our own healing path through that truth, you know? And part of that is, for example, they've released a drug for my tumor type. And the story is I go on it for the rest of my life. And um, my tumor is based on an IDH mutation, and sort of that's a normal part of like the cell's metabolic cycle. And this drug just turns off IDH. And I'm like, well, what is that going to do? Like, can you explain to me? I asked ChatGPT, what does IDH do? What if I don't have IDH? And I just say all of this because, like, I want to be an active and curious participant in my own healing. And I don't want to have judgment towards anything. Like, if Western medicine has developed something that could help me see my babies get old, I want to be open to it. But I also don't want to accept it as somehow more healing than herbs or than daily saunas or and so I like it. That is also a part of the ego work that I think psychedelics facilitates, is like I said to you before the call started, like, who are your gods? Who are your masters? Who are your experts? You know, and like, my traditional oncologist hears the shit I'm doing. He's like, okay, like, let me know how it goes. But he's not a no guy. He's like a try it. Let me know. Bring the feedback. I'm like, to do a hardcore keto diet and treat my cancer metabolically. And he's like, great. I want to know. Like, let's continue doing the tests. And so you just sort of like take it all in and believe in the multiple forms of wisdom that many different types of healers are advancing. And you'll find your medicine. Like, when I did hyperbaric oxygen recently, and I just immediately got this hit, like, this is one of my medicines.
That's
This is
interesting.
really good for me. Like, I
Yeah.
know it. And then I started reading about like the profound healing power of hyperbaric chambers, and like people with lung cancers that have seen tumors like shrink by 90%. And I'm like, this is amazing. And then I find out, oh, the insurance companies don't cover hyperbaric for, and I'm just like, ah. So it's like, you know, you have to kind of go through it all with like a really open, critical mind, and like trust that if you feel it and you feel like this is good for me, I'm not going to listen to my traditional doctor that's like, well, I don't know, the research isn't there. Or you're not going to listen to your insurance company that says, well, it's not an approved treatment for your condition. And unfortunately, you got to like figure out how to pay for it yourself, you know? And that's the kind of really hard part, is like, I have a second job simply to pay for my cancer shit. It literally requires a second stream of income because nothing that I do is covered by insurance. And I think like wherever people are at on your cancer journey, like you're going to have to figure out how to get over that. Cuz like that's just for real.
That's where the nuts and bolts of psychedelic medicine access also comes in too, because if psychedelic medicines are super expensive and they're not covered by
100%.
insurance, then they fit into the same category of all of the other alternative treatments that you've been speaking about. But what you continue to embody is empowerment and trusting your intuition so that that menu of treatment options, if it's modern medicine or some of the other alternative or integrative or holistic options, you get to choose and you trust your gut. And that intuition, it takes us back to something that you said at the beginning of the conversation, which is that on that initial ayahuasca journey, you knew intuitively that you were sick. Maybe you didn't know explicitly that it was cancer, but you knew intuitively. And I'm curious what you make of those intuitive visions or experiences that happen in psychedelic journeys that they're so hard to articulate, but it I think it is intuition, but it also starts to push into territories that I can explain with just purely materialistic scientific
It's the
Western methods.
mystical. It's the
It's the mystical,
magical.
right? That's what I'm getting to is the
I'm going to tell
mystical,
you a
the
story.
numinous part. What do you make of those mystical, numinous visions?
So I went to an ayahuasca ceremony with a shaman I had never worked with before. He was in the Shipibo tradition. He was coming out to do a ceremony here in Hawaii. And I was wearing a long sleeve sweatshirt. He knew nothing about me, did not know about my cancer diagnosis, did not know anything. And he walks up to me and he says, "You do too much kambo." Kambo is a frog medicine that wait, that's on this arm. You burn into your skin and it leads to like really intense purging. And for me, the first time I did it, I swear I barfed out all of my chemo. Like it was so viscerally what I had felt when I was on chemo. And it helps move medications out of your systems. It floods your body with healing peptides. So without even seeing this or knowing anything about me, he was like, "You have too much of the frog medicine inside of you." Okay, fair fine. That was kind of insane, but I went back, I got on my mat. And then during the ceremony, his co-facilitator came over to me and she's like, "I'm feeling really called to lay my hands on your head. Would you mind?" So she lays her hands on my head and she's there for like 10 minutes. I'm in on Mars right now. I don't really like fully know how long she was there. And then she says to me, "I want you to know that nothing's active. I can feel the spot, but nothing's active." And then she said something, and I can't remember it in this amount of time, but it was like, it was in this like hyper Western medical terminology. She said this phrase and it felt different. I'm in an ayahuasca ceremony, like more like the energy. She said this like hyper technical phase. And then whatever, I went through, they did some more healing. She had no idea I had a brain tumor. I leave, I'm remembering that. Then maybe 2 weeks later, I went and got a brain scan, and the radiologist wrote the exact phrase in my radiology report. And for me, that's about who are your gods? Who are your masters? What truths do you recognize? Whose ability to see you inside of you do you think is real? And like, yeah, I trust the MRI report and the radiologist, and he said the same thing, but like, why don't I trust her? Like, as a witch and a magician, and as somebody who might be gifted with the power to see inside the body, who uses sacred, ancient master plants. I mean, these plants exist on this planet to open us up to the unseeable, numinous, magical truths that always exist all around us. And so, why wouldn't I believe her when she says, like, scans clear, all good, you know? And I think that, again, it's about following that thread in your own process. Like, I'm going to trust the things I don't understand. I don't need a phase 3 double blind clinical trial to tell me that I know this is my medicine. I can feel it in every cell in my body that, like, this is healing. And I'm going to find a way to figure out how to make it possible for me on a regular basis. The money part, I mean, we could have a whole other episode on, like, cancer and money because it's fucking expensive.
It's super expensive.
And ayahuasca ain't gonna change that. You know, it's an important part of all of this, is like recognizing that we have been taught that there's only these two treatments, and that's why people die. And it fucking sucks. Like, the one thing psychedelics will give you is reduce your fear of death. So if you have cancer and you are scared to die, like, that can be one thing that happens, is that you are like, oh, it's my body that will. I tell my daughter all the time, I'm going to haunt you. I'm going to be with you all the time.
Mom,
You
don't
will
haunt
never
me.
get rid of me. I am
Mom.
with you forever. Just like my dad is with me forever. And I'd like to be in this body. So I'm going to try to figure it out. And I'm going to wake up into my own capacity to tap into whatever it is that helps this body carry on.
That's right. Look, we're all not gonna be here one day. Death is a real thing. The ego death experienced on psychedelic medicines, it's really good practice for real death that is coming for us all. And you're making a great point there. You also talked earlier about finding your medicine and doing what it takes to make that medicine yours. And Ashley, that's been the work that you've been doing. It's the work that we're doing at Healing Cancer Journeys. And let's journey together, and let's continue that slow process of providing safe legal access to psychedelic medicines. To get us wrapped up here, two thoughts on guests that you'd like to see on a future Healing Cancer Journeys podcast. Who would you recommend? What ideas could they contribute to the podcast?
I was trying to think about this. My integrative doctor in Hawaii is incredible. Her name's Allison Gondre. She runs a um, clinic called Elevate Health. And I always tell people she's got, like, all the cool little machines that have been, that are in Europe and Canada, but for some reason we don't have them in the US. She's really invested in that, and she's just really at the top of her game. So I would suggest Allison Gondre. And I don't know these people, but I guess they're running cancer retreats, for psychedelic retreats for women with breast cancer. And actually, that's how I thought you found me, through them, Dan,
No, that's interesting.
because
Yeah.
I got connected to them at the exact same time as you reached out to me. But that feels cool. I don't know what they're doing, but that they're doing it inside the legal framework of the Oregon law. And so that feels curious to me, because I also think one of the other 9 key factors is, like, leaning into community. And, like, we don't heal alone, we heal together. And I love that idea of people navigating a diagnosis, dropping in deeply together, like using psychedelics as one of those modalities.
Being in community. And no, I'm not aware of that group either, but let's figure out who they are,
Yeah, I'll
and
connect you.
we'll have them
Totally.
on the podcast. So, okay.
Cool.
Well, Ashley, thank you. If folks want to find you online or on social media, how do they follow you, find you?
So my handle is Ashley Lukens, and Clarity Project is Clarity Hawaii. And I try not to be on social media. So that's my only caveat. It's like you can find me there, but I'm not there. My email address is bossy@ashleylukens.com. So you can also email me.
Good. Ashley Lukens, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Dan. Congrats on this great podcast concept. I'm really into it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
All
See
right.
ya.
Thank you.
Ciao.